Welcome to Aeronet's Visual Simulation Training Program for the Airbus A320. The radio communication system is made up of the VHF HF transceivers, the Audio Management Unit, or AMU, the Audio Control Panels, or ACPs, and the Radio Management Panels, or RMPs. The number 1 and 2 Audio Control and Radio Management Panels are located on the left and right side of the center pedestal. The number 3 Audio Control and Radio Management Panels are located on the overhead panel. There is a press-to-talk switch for a boom mic or the oxygen mask mic on each audio control panel and on each pilot side stick. In addition, a handheld microphone is installed at each pilot station. A loudspeaker is installed on the lower outboard sides of the instrument panel. A loudspeaker volume control knob is located in front of each pilot on the instrument panel. The Intercommunication System is divided into 2 main subsystems. The Audio Management System allows the flight crew to interface with all of the radio communications and navigation equipment, the interphone systems, call systems, and passenger address system. The Cabin Intercommunication Data System, or SIDS, controls and processes signals for such things as the interphone system, call systems, PA system, cabin lighting, the passenger entertainment system, and the emergency evacuation and lavatory smoke detection system.
The Cockpit Voice Recorder, or CVR, records all crew member conversations, all cockpit oral warnings, and all radio communications. Passenger address system announcements are recorded if the PA reception knob on the 3rd audio control panel is selected to the on position. Only the last 30 minutes of recorded information is retained. The CVR controls are located on the left side of the overhead panel.
The Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS, allows a direct data exchange between the aircraft and the airline ground computer through VHF number 3. The ACARS functions are accessed through the Multifunction Control and Display Units, or MCDUs, and uplinked messages are normally printed out on the cockpit printer located on the center pedestal. The aircraft has 3 identical VHF communication systems. VHF 3 is normally used for ACARS, but it may be used for voice communications as a backup. In the emergency electrical configuration, only VHF number 1 functions. Each system has its own transceiver in the avionics bay and a separate antenna on the fuselage. The aircraft may be equipped with 1 or 2 identical HF communication systems. Each system has a separate transceiver in the avionics compartment, and if 2 systems are installed, a common tuner and a common antenna in the vertical stabilizer. The CellCal system will advise the crew both orally and visually when a ground station is calling the aircraft. A buzzer sounds, and the appropriate radio call button illuminates in amber, indicating which VHF or HF radio is receiving the call. The call light can be canceled by pressing the reset key on the audio control panel. The radio management panels, or RMPs, allow the crew to control all of the VHF and HF radio communications equipment. Each RMP can control any VHF or HF radio. They can also be used as a backup to the FMGCs for controlling radio navigation systems. In the emergency electrical configuration, only RMP number 1 will function. The on-off switch controls electrical power to the RMP panel. The frequency selector knobs are used to select the radio frequency. The outer knob controls whole numbers, and the inner knob controls the decimal numbers. When a new frequency is selected, it is displayed in the standby window. Pressing the transfer key transfers the standby frequency to the active window and the active frequency back to the standby window. Touch the frequency selector knob to select a new frequency, then the transfer key to transfer the new frequency to the active window. Pressing one of the radio comm selection keys on an RMP gives that RMP control of the selected radio and illuminates the green monitor light. Normally, RMP1 controls VHF1 and HF1, and RMP2 controls VHF2 and HF2. If a transceiver normally associated with one RMP is selected by another, the white selector light illuminates on both RMPs. For example, when the VHF number 2 radio comm selector key is pressed on RMP number 1, the number 2 transceiver will now also be tuned by RMP number 1. Both RMP number 1 and RMP number 2 will display the same tuned frequency, and the white selector light illuminates on both. For aircraft with HF radios installed and selected, this push-button switch allows the selection of AM mode. When the push button is pressed, the indicator light is displayed and the AM mode is now active. When the indicator light is out, the radio is in the default SSB or single sideband mode. Lifting the transparent guard and pressing the radio navigation backup mode key allows the pilot to tune navigation receivers and courses through the radio navigation selection keys. Normal communication radio selections and frequencies are unaffected. Backup navigation mode is covered in detail in the navigation module. If a microphone has been transmitting for more than 30 seconds, an ECAM caution is generated. Check that none of the press-to-talk switches are stuck, or select another transmission key to reset the caution. The intercommunication system is divided into two main subsystems, the Audio Management System and the Cabin Intercommunications Data System, or SIDS. The crew uses the Audio Management System to interface with all radio communication and navigation equipment installed on the aircraft. It also provides access to the interphone systems, the call systems, and the passenger address system. The Audio Management System is comprised of an Audio Management Unit, or AMU, which integrates and allows easy selection of all audio signals, 3 audio control panels, headset sockets, oxygen mask microphones, handheld microphones, 2 cockpit speakers, press-to-talk switches on the side sticks, a cell-cal code selection panel, an audio switching panel, and an interphone jack at the external power panel near the nose gear bay. The Cabin Intercommunication Data System, or SIDS, transmits, controls, and processes signal information for the following cabin systems: cabin and service interphones, call systems, passenger address system, illuminated cabin signs, reading lights, cabin lights, the passenger entertainment system, emergency evacuation signaling, and lavatory smoke detectors. There are 2 SIDS directors operating in parallel, with one active and the other one as a standby backup unit. Connected to the SIDS directors are the Forward Flight Attendants Panel, a Programming and Test Unit, and a number of decoder-encoder units A and B, which interconnect passenger and cabin attendant stations to the SIDS directors. The flight crew uses the Audio Control Panel, or ACP, to select a VHF or HF transceiver for transmitting and for the selection of systems for reception and volume control. The top row on the ACP is where the various radio transmission keys are located. The pilot selects the desired radio for transmission by pressing the respective push button. Only one button can be selected at a time. The green light indicates the radio in use. To deselect the radio in use, the push button is pressed again, or the pilot selects another radio. Touch the VHF1 transmission push button to select that radio for transmission. The call portion of the push button will flash in amber and a buzzer will sound when the cell-cal system detects a call on a VHF or HF radio. The mechanic or attendant portion of the push button will flash amber and a buzzer will sound when a call is detected from the nose gear bay or when there is a call from a cabin attendant. To cancel the light on the call, mechanic, and attendant buttons, press the reset key. The second row on the ACP has the reception knobs to allow the flight crew to select and adjust the volume of each audio channel. The bottom row on the ACP has the reception knobs for the navigation radios. Pressing and releasing the knob out selects the associated channel. More than one can be selected at a time. A white skirt is visible around the lower part of the knob, and the integral white light will come on if the pedestal lights are on. The volume may be adjusted by rotating the knob. Touch the VHF1 reception knob to select that receiver. The on-voice key, when pressed, will inhibit the navigation radio ident signals from a VOR or ADF and allow only voice reception from those stations. The on section of the push button will illuminate in green. The interphone radio switch acts as a press-to-talk switch. Selected to interphone, it allows the boom and mask microphones to transmit on interphone regardless of which transmission key is selected. The crew must have the interphone reception knob selected to be able to hear these transmissions. Pressing and holding the switch to the radio position allows the boom and mask microphones to transmit on the selected radio. The radio selector on each side stick controller also acts as a press-to-talk switch. It is spring-loaded to the neutral position. When squeezed to the radio position, the boom or mask microphones transmit through the radio selected on the ACP. The loudspeaker volume control knobs adjust the volume of the cockpit loudspeakers. When the knob is in the off position, the associated cockpit loudspeaker is off. Turning the knob clockwise from the off position increases the speaker volume. This knob has no control over, nor does it affect the loudness of the oral alert and voice messages. The audio switching selector allows the crew to utilize the third ACP if ACP 1 or 2 should fail. The knob has 3 positions. In the norm position, each crew member is connected to his own respective audio control panel. With the selector in the Captain 3 position, the captain uses the number 3 ACP for transmission and audio selections. Audio 3 transferred appears in green on the ECAM memo section. With the selector in the FO3 position, the first officer uses the number 3 ACP for transmission and audio selections. The flight interphone system allows the flight crew to talk amongst themselves or to communicate with a ground crewman using a headset through an interphone jack on the external power panel. The interphone reception knob must be in the on position to hear interphone communications. Transmissions can be made using a boom or mask mic using the interphone side of the interphone radio switch on the audio control panel, regardless of transmission key selection. If the mechanic transmission key is also pressed, Transmissions can be made with a microphone, mask, or boom mic using the side stick press-to-talk switch or the radio side of the interphone radio switch on the audio control panel. The cabin interphone system allows the flight crew to communicate with the cabin crew or for the cabin crew to communicate amongst themselves. When the cabin transmission key on the ACP is pressed and the cabin reception knob is selected on, the flight crew can talk to the flight attendants using either the boom, mask, or hand microphones. The cabin attendants use their cabin attendant handsets. The service interphone system, used mainly for maintenance purposes, allows for communications between the cockpit and cabin stations and the service interphone jacks, or between the various service interphone jacks themselves. There are 8 interphone jack locations on the exterior of the aircraft. On the overhead service interphone panel is a push-button switch, normally left in the auto position. This allows the system to be used when the aircraft is on the ground. When the aircraft is raised off its landing gear, the service interphone system may be used if this push button is selected to the on position. The ground mechanic call system allows the flight crew and ground crew to call each other in order to establish communications. The mechanic push button on the overhead call panel is pushed to advise the ground crew that the flight crew wishes to communicate with them. When the push button is pressed and held, the blue cockpit call light on the external power panel illuminates and an external horn sounds. Touch the mechanic call push button. When the push button is released, the horn stops, but the light remains illuminated. The light remains illuminated for 60 seconds, but it can be extinguished at any time by the reset button on the external power panel. The cockpit call push button on the external power panel, when pressed, sounds a buzzer on the flight deck, and the mechanic light on the ACP flashes amber. When the push button is released, the buzzer stops, but the mechanic light on the ACP remains illuminated for 60 seconds. The flight crew can extinguish the light using the reset push button on the ACP. The cabin call system allows the flight crew and the cabin crew to call each other in order to establish communications. If it is desired to communicate with the flight attendants, the forward and/or aft push button on the calls panel is momentarily pressed. Touch the forward attendant call button. A red light comes on at the corresponding cabin area call panel. Captain call and a green light comes on at the attendant indication panel, and a high-low chime sounds through the area loudspeaker. The flight attendant then picks up one of the handsets to respond. When a flight attendant wishes to call the flight deck, the captain push button on the handset is momentarily pressed. Touch the captain push button on the flight attendant handset to call the cockpit. In the cockpit, the attendant light will flash amber on the ACPs and a buzzer will sound. The light will flash for 60 seconds or until the reset push button is pressed on any ACP. To respond, press the attendant transmission key and select the cabin reception knob on the ACP. The buzzer and lights are inhibited during takeoff and landing. When the emergency push button on the overhead panel is momentarily pressed, the call light will flash amber and the on light will flash white. 3 high-low chimes are heard through the cabin loudspeakers. A red light flashes at all area call panels in the cabin, and emergency call is displayed on all attendant indication panels. Touch the emergency call push button.
When the emergency call push button is pressed on a cabin attendant handset, the white on light and the amber call light flash on the overhead calls panel. The amber attendant light on the ACP panels flash, and 3 long buzzers sound in the cockpit. Interphone communications are established by the pilot selecting the attendant audio control panel transmission key and then responding by depressing the press-to-talk switch on the audio control panel or side stick. It is of paramount importance to realize that you cannot hear the flight attendants until the cockpit microphone has been keyed, at least momentarily. Touch the emergency call push button to call the cockpit.
The passenger address system allows the pilots or the flight attendants to communicate to the passengers over the cabin loudspeakers. The flight crew may make an announcement using 2 methods. The first method is to use the cockpit handset located on the end of the center pedestal. It is removed from its cradle, and the press-to-talk button is held in while the announcement is made. The second method is to use a boom, mask, or hand microphone with the audio control panel. The PA reception knob is pressed on, the volume is adjusted, then the PA transmission key is pressed and held while the announcement is made. Touch the PA reception knob and the PA transmission key to make an announcement. When the guarded evac command push button on the overhead emergency evacuation panel is pressed and released, the on light comes on, the evac light flashes red, and an evacuation horn sounds in the cockpit. In the cabin, the evacuation horn sounds, and the evac lights in the forward and aft flight attendant panels flash. Pressing the horn shutoff button silences the horn in the cockpit only. When the evac command push button is pressed off, all lights and sounds in the cockpit and cabin will cease. The captain and purser switch has 2 positions. In the captain position, the evacuation alert may only be activated from the flight deck. In the captain and purser position, the alert may be activated from either the cockpit as described or from the cabin by pressing the command push button at the forward or aft flight attendant panel. In the cockpit, the evac light on the command switch flashes red and the evacuation horn sounds. The cockpit voice recorder records and retains the last 30 minutes of direct conversations between the crew members in the cockpit, all the oral warnings that sound in the cockpit, all radio communications, and all crew intercommunications. All passenger address announcements are also recorded if the PA reception knob on the number 3 ACP has been selected on. The cockpit voice recorder consists of a built-in microphone on the overhead panel, a hot mic function that records the crew members' voices directly from their microphones, a control panel on the overhead panel, and the crash-proof 4-track recorder located in the aft section of the aircraft. Attached to the recorder is an underwater locating beacon that is activated if the recorder becomes submerged. The recorder controls are located on the left side of the overhead panel. With the ground control switch in the auto position, the CVR is energized on the ground only during the first 5 minutes after electrical power has been supplied to the aircraft or when at least one engine is running. It is powered at all times in flight. After landing, it is de-energized 5 minutes after the last engine is shut down. When it is desired to power the CVR on the ground for maintenance tests or to record checklist usage before engine start, the ground control push button should be momentarily pressed on. The blue on light illuminates. When the CVR erase push button is pressed for 2 seconds with the aircraft on the ground and the parking brake set, the tape will be completely erased. When the CVR test push button is pressed and held, it will test the system if it has been energized and the parking brake is on. A low-frequency signal will sound through the 2 cockpit loudspeakers. Touch the test push button to test the system. The Aircraft Communication Addressing and Reporting System, or ACARS, allows for direct exchange of data between the aircraft and the airline operator's ground computer using the VHF number 3 radio. Uplinks may contain, for example, pilot-requested weather reports or messages from load planning, dispatch, or crew scheduling. Downlinks may be initiated by the crew and include such things as company position reports and ETA reports. Downlinks, which are automatically sent, are initiated by the ACARS management unit, which is programmed according to the airline operator's requests, and include takeoff and departure times, engine monitoring reports, and systems failure messages. The peripherals connected to the ACARS management unit are the VHF-3 radio and RMP, the MCDUs, FMGC 1 and 2, Flight Warning Computers 1 and 2, the System Data Acquisition Concentrator, the Aircraft Integrated Data System, the Centralized Fault Display System, and a printer for a hard copy of messages. ACARS is accessed through the MCDU menu page from either MCDU. The various pages for ACARS are accessed using the line select keys. The printer provides a hard copy of all messages sent to the aircraft. Touch the MCDU menu key to select the MCDU menu. Touch the ACARS line select key to select the ACARS main menu. All ACARS functions are accessed from this page. The advisory ACARS standby on the upper ECAM memo section will show up in green when there is a loss of ACARS communications between the aircraft and ground stations. For more detailed information regarding ACARS operation and use, please refer to the ACARS Operations Manual provided by your airline.